Camera for Cam's Mortgage Minute on Thursday, January 24th. Hey, a few months ago, a year ago, we ever heard nothing about a housing bubble in Canada. There was no predictions of it, nobody was talking about it, but now everywhere you look at Maclean's magazine and other publications, and it's everywhere. And the housing bubble is here, the market's going to burst, it's going to crash. You'll remember, for those of you who follow my Mortgage Minute, I did one quite a while ago with a Maclean's cover that was pretty crazy. That was way back even before. Basically, Maclean's every so often is telling us that the end of the world is near. So obviously they know something that the rest of us don't. But let's talk about the different kinds of things that this does. This creates basically a panacea of, a craziness in the market, a crisis that maybe doesn't exist, but the fundamentals don't necessarily point to it, but however people's sentiment starts changing. So let's look at some of the things that are the fundamentals right now. The affordability. The Bank of Canada's Housing Affordability Index shows that newly built standard houses are as affordable as they were 10 years ago. And the Royal Bank of Canada's affordability indexes for existing housing shows that they exceed their long-term values, averages modestly. Although the national figures, of course, are going to be skewed by Vancouver, which has pretty high and overinflated prices. Moreover, credit analysts don't see a U.S.-style crash or meltdown here. There was a professor, Robert Schiller, and he told CBC in September that Canada should be spared because its banks have low subprime exposure. And some other economists wrote that the U.S. plunge 5 years ago followed years of credit tightening moves. Anyone think that? The Bank of Canada is going to raise rates anytime soon? Pretty unlikely when inflation is barely above 1%. Now, yet some media sources still are going to constantly keep pointing to dire consequences. The world, like I said, is going to come to an end. And it brings to mind a paper, a 2012 paper that was written, actually, if you get a chance, find it. It's a pretty good one. It says, "What have they been thinking? Home buyers' behavior in hot and cold markets." It was written by Mr. Schiller and co-authored by some other folks. And the paper looks at press coverage leading up to the U.S. housing collapse and documents the frequency with which articles kept coming out talking about an imminent crash in a housing bubble. June of 2005 was pretty busy with cover stories in The Economist, Barron's, Time magazine, and various other publications pointing to it. Mr. Schiller and his co-authors contend that the prominence of the bubble theme produced basically a mindset, a turning point in the public thinking, where the public started to believe it. It's sort of like when you've heard of people who begin to believe their own press and their own PR. They start changing and they inevitably start becoming who they think the press or the PR is pointing to. And the housing bubble was very similar. They figured that there are reasons to suspect that the price changes were related to the public swings in opinion on which way the market was going. So could we be talking ourselves into a crash? Well, you know what? When people read headlines over and over and again, and you constantly are telling them one message and inundating and barraging them with it, hey, we start seeing results. I see it every day when I've got folks who keep telling me, hey, the market's going to go lower and lower and lower. And I say, well, what are you pointing this to? Well, I read it in the paper. And inevitably, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if enough people just sit on the sidelines with nothing going on, the market will inevitably change. So the question is are we going to encounter that soft landing that the government was hoping for with the new mortgage rules? Or are we going to have everybody buy into what the press and the media are saying, and suddenly basically it's like Chicken Little and the sky is falling? And if we believe and that's the mindset we get into, I think we're going to be in for some pretty dire times. And we certainly hope that we can avoid the trauma that the Americans have experienced next door to us. Because that, folks, I tell you, wasn't pretty, or currently is still not pretty. Anyways, just a few musings and thoughts, but I also thought I'll leave you with this. The funny thing with the media I find as well is that as soon as there's a slight break of light, a slight hope out there, they suddenly start singing a different tune. Now the market's going to be phenomenal. It's fantastic. Never a better time to buy. These are the same folks that help run it up and run it down. The question is where are you in this? What do you believe? And the bottom line is, if you need a house and it makes sense, ignore the media, ignore the rest of the noise. And the bottom line is you got to look at your budget, your finances, and see what you can do with it. Anyway, it's been Cam for Cam's Mortgage Minute. Just a few thoughts I thought I'd share with you. And as always, if you need any mortgage help, looking for somebody to give you a hand, give us a call at the Auxilium team, Cam the Mortgage Man. We're always ready, able, and happy to help.